Howdy there, folks. I've been getting a lot of questions about jigs. What are the different types of jigs? And how do I fish jigs? And what are the best colors? Well, it's not an easy question to answer. And decided to just go ahead and do a video, a little show and tell, and about the different jigs I use, how I rig them, and a little bit how I fish them. So we're going to start off with the swim jig. Now a swim jig is made to swim, basically. You can cast it out, crank it in like a crankbait, you can pause it, you can pop it. It really isn't any bad way to fish a swim jig. I fish them a lot in the same type of places I would fish a spinnerbait, but places where a spinnerbait liable to get hooked up. And as you can see, this has a weed guard, so it doesn't get hooked up quite as much as a spinnerbait might would. The other thing is, now this is a Santone Lures Rayburn swim jig, and you see this flat head here, or flat part? When it hits something, it bounces or skips off of it. Be it a rock, a twig, a branch, some grass. And when it deflects off of it, kind of like a square bill, it'll draw a strike. So I really love the Rayburn swim jigs. They got very stout hooks, so you're not worried about bending a hook on them. And they got trailer keepers. Now, what do I fish as a trailer on this type of jig? Well, basically when I'm fishing a swim jig, I'm trying to mimic some kind of bait fish. Now there are some crawfish colors. You can put a crawfish type trailer on it, but for the most part when I fish them, I'm trying to mimic some kind of bait fish. So if there's shad in the lake, I'm going to go with a white whitish color. The one that I prefer most is called acid perch. I didn't grab one of them. I just have this one. I think this is mean green. This one works really well with a little bit of blue and chartreuse in it. But I try to mimic a bait fish. And for a trailer, see how this has got a little white and blue in it? And I would pick a Cream Lures Reel Screamer in this bluish color, silver and blue. As you can see, they would work really well together. Shad, some bluegill for this color. I would fish it, say in reeds, cast it right into the reeds, pull it out over laydowns, cast it into the laydown. When it hit a branch or something, it will deflect off. I pause then and let it drop. A lot of times that'll get a strike too if the deflection didn't get a strike. Same thing with grass. If I hit a stalk of grass or a reed, when it deflects off, I'm going to pause it for just a second and stop my retrieve. Sometimes you're going to cast out, let it go to the bottom, and then slow roll it back, and every time it hits something, pause. Sometimes they want you burning it. I mean really moving it. Sometimes they want a little pop in there. So you got to play around with your retrieve. Swim jig can be fished in just about any type of cover, in various different methods. So hopefully that answers some questions about swim jigs. Basically color wise too, the clearer the water, the lighter the color. If you fish in really cloudy water, now you're going to want to go to a darker color if you're going to fish a swim jig, just like any other jig. Now the next jig we'll talk about here is basically your standard jig. You can call it a flipping jig, you can call it just a working jig, casting jig. You can fish these in many different ways. The shape of this head is so it'll come through cover really well. There's actually two types that Santone has. This is your standard rattling jig. It has the rattles on the back side of it, and then you have your M series jig. And I fish these a little bit deeper than I fish these. These don't. The M series don't have the rattles. I think maybe you can get the rattles on them. I'd have to check. When I'm fishing a jig like this, I'm trying to mimic a crawfish. So I'm going to go with a crawfish type trailer. And my favorite trailer for both the rattling jig and the M series jig is this cream bad bug or beaver. Try to match the color as close as possible. This one here I'd probably fish on a Rayburn red jig, but I might fish this color on a couple different colored jigs. This here's called Oh Boy. This is one of the new colors in the Pro Series from Cream. Got a lot of action. Makes the bait look big. I'm looking for a big bite. I want a big bait. How do I fish them? Well, I'll fish them on submerged rock piles. I'll fish them in laydowns along the bank. I'll pitch them into reeds. I'll pitch them into grass. I'll pitch them into brush. You can fish them deep into brush piles. You can fish them on rock piles deep. Again, a real versatile type of jig. Let your imagination take you where you're going with it. But when you're doing that, you want to think about how a crawfish acts, because you're imitating a crawfish. Generally, when I'm trying to imitate a crawfish, I'll give it 2 quick pops, because that's what a crawfish will do. He'll pop, pop, and then he'll sink. When I'm working it in brush, I'm jigging it or bouncing it, and I'll bring it over a branch, and I'll let it sink down. And then but I want to keep my line tight, because that's when one's going to hit it. And then I'll work it to the next branch, and I'll jig it up and down on that branch, make it wave at that fish. I'll bring it over that branch, and I'll let it drop, and so forth. On rocks, I'm going to move it up against the rock, and I'm going to shake my rod a little bit. Let that beaver wave at them. Might get a bite. And then, after a couple seconds of wagging it, I'm going to pop it up over that rock. Make it hop over that rock, and then I'm going to let it fall back down to the bottom. And a lot of times, if that fish is on the other side of that rock, that's when he's going to hit. Again, with these rattling jigs, you got very stout hooks, you got good keepers, you got good weed guards. Now the third type is the football jig, and as you can see, that head is shaped like a football. Now these jigs are more open water type of jigs. I mean, you're fishing on solid bottoms. There may be gravel or small rocks, drop-offs, mid-lake humps, that type of thing. There's a couple different ways to fish this jig, but you always want this jig on the bottom. I generally cast it way as far as I can cast it. As you can see, this is a 3/4 ounce head. So I'm going to make a long cast. I'm going to let it sink down to the bottom. Once it gets on the bottom, I'm going to drag it 6 inches. Keeping the line tight, drag it 6 inches. Keeping the line tight, drag it a foot. See if that works. If that's how they want it, then that's the way I'll continue to fish it. If not, then I might move it further. I might move it 2 feet, a little bit faster. You can also cast it out, let it sink to the bottom, and retrieve it slowly. Let it stay in contact with the bottom. And what that's doing, as you can see, it's got rattles on it. So those rattles are moving. That head is moving around. As you drag it along, it's bouncing off stuff. It's making noise. It's causing a little cloud of debris to come up from the bottom. Looks like a crawfish moving along the bottom. It's basically what it's looking like. Picture a football. If you roll a football, it wobbles. It doesn't roll straight. That's the same thing what this football jig is going to do. And I've caught some mighty big fish on these football jigs. Once again, you got a good weed guard. Now, and I'm going to show you here, and this goes for all the, if you can find the middle of this weed guard, well, and stick your finger down in there and flush it out. What that does is gives you more coverage to your hook. Now, I see a lot of people do this, and that's fine for some types of fishing. If you just form it into two and spread it, I don't prefer that. That's some chance of getting your hook caught. If you spread them out, like so, what that does, it gives you good coverage. Even if it rolls over, your hook's covered. Also, when that fish hits, it's a whole lot easier to set that hook. And that goes for all the types of jigs I'm fishing. Now, what's my preferred trailer for a football jig? That would be a cream crawl. This here again is one of the new colors. This is called Bama Crawl. That baby looks like a crawfish, don't it? You match it up with a jig like this, going along, stirring up debris, making noise. Big girls can't turn it down. I'm guaranteeing it. If you look at my blog, there's a really good article about fishing these football jigs, and explains a lot about finding the places to fish the football jigs. Just do a search on Derek Herring fishing. Alright, now I stay with as much natural colors with the football jig as possible. I want my browns and my greens. This one here is called Bass Candy. It's kind of a green pumpkin, but it's got green and purple and red highlights in it. It really looks like candy, and they really like this color. If the water's a little dingy or murkier, I may go to something with some blacks and blues and purples in them, basically, and go to a darker color trailer as well. Now, last but not least is a finesse jig. This is a smaller jig, lighter weight, still got your weed guard. You're still going to want to do the same thing with this weed guard. You're going to want to, because you're going to be fishing this on lighter tackle. Kind of spread it out, get a good coverage. I fish this when the bite gets tough. I fish this when the water's cold, real cold. It gives me a smaller profile. I'll fish it a lot, real similar to a shaky head. It gives me a little bit bigger bait looking than a shaky head would. What's my preferred trailer for a finesse jig? Well, that's going to be a straight tail worm, kind of like this cream scoundrel. By the way, this is the original plastic worm. The scoundrel's been around since 1949. This is a fantastic color. I don't know if I'll be able to show you. Maybe you can see it changing colors, but this is chameleon, and this does change colors. It'll go from this brown color in the shade to almost neon purple when the light hits it. I think you might be able to see that tail is kind of turning there. Great color. Just put it on there and fish that jig like a shaky head. You can fish it a little bit faster than a shaky head. We've actually caught them up on the points early in spring, pre-spawn, and those finesse jigs are just plumb deadly. So I hope that helps identify some jigs. I'll have some more videos later on in the year of me actually fishing some jigs. Now that I got my camera set up back going again, I've been kind of slacking on the videos because my camera wasn't set up. I was having some problems, but now I got it all set back up, and we'll do some more videos later on. So tight lines to you, and hey, take a kid fishing. Bye.